Hi, everyone. David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at the DRF Saturday race of the day, which is the Grade 1 Whitney Race 11 at Saratoga. Mike, this race always a highlight of the summer season each year, and this year's race does not disappoint.
Came up with a really good field, even with the expected scratch of the horse on the rail, who would have been a major player here. This race, we're going to have 9, David. We're going to have 9. Well, maybe not 9. We're going to have at least 7 really good ones in here.
I asked a friend of mine when I saw this field, what's the over-under on horses that are actually going to run in this race? I set the line at 7.5. We'll see if there are scratches beyond Mindframe, as Mike was alluding to. Our colleague Dave Gretting did report in his advance that Mindframe entered in this race, but he will only participate if something happens to Fierceness in the 6 days since entries were taken. That's obviously not expected, so we are anticipating Mindframe will be a scratch in this race. I'll just note, for the purposes of the morning line, I kind of treated Mindframe like an also eligible. I didn't count him when I did the points for the rest of the race, so he wouldn't mess up the line for the other horses in here. So I'm kind of anticipating the scratch if you just ignore those 5-2 odds. With this being the DRF Saturday race of the day, we'll note that you can get free past performances for this race. So if you want to handicap along with Mike and me as we go through this preview, you just create a free account at DRF.com or log into an account if you already have one. Go to the race of the day page and you can access free classic, formulator, and Timeform US past performances for each and every race of the day. Mike, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector, because you're mentioning the pace situation, the speed in this race. Chad Brown entered a rabbit of the number 8 Contrary Thinking, assuming that he runs, as well as the other horse that I pegged at 50-1 on the morning line, Mama's Gold. You would anticipate they're going to be going quickly up front, and maybe that works against the number 9 Fierceness more than anybody else if the pace does come to fruition.
Exactly. We'll see how, what the field looks like at post time. And then you're right. It feels like if it does stay, relatively intact here and both the 4 and the 8 participate, I mean, this pace is going to be solid. They have the 8 sort of mid pack here on the pace projector. That's not where he'll be if he runs, because he's only in here to provide pace. So he'll be up front. This pace will be fast. I'm with you. There are a couple of horses that probably helps in here if they go fast, but it doesn't help Fierceness. It probably works against it.
Let's go through this field from the rail out, beginning with the number 1 Mindframe. We mentioned he's likely to scratch from this race. Mike, just on the off chance that something does happen to Fierceness and Mindframe runs in here, I don't know if you thought about it. Would you like him in this race, or did you think last time was the time in this Stephen Foster?
No, I would like him in this race if this is where he ran. And I didn't pick him when we get to the pictures because he's not supposed to run, but I would have, and he would be the horse I would have been leaning on if he ran here.
Let's move on to the number 2, Skippy Longstocking. We'll take a look at his most recent start in the Gold Cup out at Santa Anita. Now, this was obviously a field that doesn't quite measure up to the one that he'll be facing on Saturday in the Whitney, but he got the job done going 1.25 miles. And Mike, I think it's fair to say 10 furlongs is probably stretching Skippy Longstocking a little bit past his limit, but he still was able to gut out this victory. He's just been a horse throughout his career that is always dangerous at the Grade 2 and Grade 3 level, but getting that Grade 1 victory has been a long time struggle.
Yeah, they're going to try for another one here. I'll even give him maybe a little bit of extra credit for that race we just watched, David, because he doesn't really want to go that far, but he got it out to win. More than anything else, it was just another great job by Saffie Joseph. He finds great races to run this horse, and he's been very, very well managed. And, he's obviously rewarded them a lot of wins, a lot of money. But it just feels like when he runs in races like this, he's just not quite good enough.
The number 3, Highland Falls, is returning to the site of his greatest achievement when he won the Grade 1 Jockey Club Gold Cup at the end of last year's Saratoga meet. Now, he was obviously a big disappointment in the Breeders' Cup Classic after that, though let's not be too hard on him. That was an awfully tough year to contest the Breeders' Cup Classic. He came back off a long layoff last time, Mike, in this optional claiming allowance race that we'll take a look at Aqueduct, and he was beating a much weaker field than the one he'll be facing off against on Saturday, but I liked what I saw here. He got a good trip, but you really had to appreciate the way that he extended his stride through the final 1/4 mile and really widened on this field at the end.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just one of those things here where obviously you're not going to get too excited about the horses that are behind him, but this is exactly what you would have wanted from Highland Falls. He's off the layoff here. He finishes really well. He never had to get down to serious business in there. And so it should set him up really well here for another step up in class back into the Whitney. And listen, this is a horse, the Breeders' Cup Classic notwithstanding, as you already mentioned, it was a tough race. It was a really fast pace. And, I don't think you're supposed to hold against him too much. This horse was really progressing throughout the summer last year, right up to that big Grade 1 win on this track.
I do wonder if maybe this is just a stepping stone towards his ultimate goal of winning another Jockey Club Gold Cup, because that race seems like it's tailor-made for him. But he showed in that win last year he's good enough to go with horses like this. The number 4, Mama's Gold, likely to be the pace setter in this race, Mike. I think even if they're intent on getting to the front end with the rabbit contrary thinking, I don't know if that horse can stay with Mama's Gold if he runs off the way that he sometimes does, like we saw Tupac in the Excelsior. Now, he faded badly that day. He hung around longer against New York Brits and the commentator last time, but even his very best effort makes him a real stretch in this spot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's a really fast horse, and if they do run him here, they'll probably just put him on the lead here and let him go as far as he can, as fast as he can, and I wouldn't expect him to be around at the end.
The number 5, Sierra Leone, is a horse who's trying to get back to the winner's circle for the first time since he won the Breeders' Cup Classic at the end of last season. And Mike, obviously, he got a great pace setup when he won the Classic out at Del Mar, I should say. But I did appreciate at least the way that he made an early move into that pace around the far turn and then was able to see it out at the end, beating one of the best Classic fields we've seen in a while, with Fierceness and Forever Young showing up in that race. Now, since coming back as a 4-year-old, he's lost 2 races at relatively short prices. The New Orleans Classic just didn't really sit up for him. He probably wasn't fully cranked for that race anyway. It was kind of the plan B at that time of year. And then he came back for this Stephen Foster off a bit of a layoff. And Mike, I thought it was a pretty encouraging effort because Flavien Prat, again, like he did in the Breeders' Cup, tried to get him moving early down the backstretch. And I think it maybe took away from his late kick a little bit at the end.
Yeah, I'm conflicted about that race. You're right. I mean, he did really get this horse going a little bit earlier, which I thought at the time, as I was watching the race unfold live, I thought it was actually a pretty good move from Prat. Maybe it wasn't. They didn't go that fast in front of him, so maybe it worked against him. I don't know, David. I mean, I've seen that from Sierra Leone way too many times in his career so far, where he'll make a move. It looks like he's going to be there, bearing down the leaders. I don't know if you want to say loses focus, or he just sort of stops finding there for a little while, and then he's running again the last 100 yards of the race. I don't know. He's obviously really talented. He can easily win this race. He's certainly one of the horses to beat in here. I'll just be honest with you. I've been a fan of his for a long time. I'm very, very tired of this horse.
I think he is the horse to beat, but you've got to be real when you look at his past performances. He's lost 6 of his last 7 races, now competing at the highest level, but he's just not a horse you can always rely upon to get the right trip and deliver a victory. The number 6, Disarm, Mike, I know is a horse that you've had some fondness for a couple of years now, and he is one that's woken up at Saratoga in the past. I mean, he ran a couple of his best races during his 3-year-old season, finishing second in the Travers up here, and he kind of had a resurgence at Saratoga last summer, even though he didn't win the Whitney or the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He ran well in both of those races. Now he's coming off a brief freshening. He is entered as an MTO at Saratoga earlier in the week in an optional claiming allowance race, but I would imagine he's likely to participate here if that race doesn't come off the turf.
Yeah, I think you'll probably see him here, and we'll just see if he can, find a way to finally pan out, because he never really did pan out after some really early potential. He lost to me about a year ago. I'm probably never coming back to him. I guess it's at least worth noting that if he runs in the Whitney, he will do it with bar shoes off. He's been running in bar shoes, so the bar shoes off, maybe that'll make a difference here. I like this horse. I just don't want to bet him in races like this anymore.
Mike, the number 7, White Abarrio, he's become a really tough horse to peg because he's so inconsistent, but you know that somewhere in there's an effort that's not just going to beat this field, but might dominate this field. I mean, as he did in this very race a couple of years ago when he was in the barn of Rick Dutrow and upset the Whitney at 10-1, winning off by daylight. Now, he did win the Breeders' Cup Classic that season. He's actually going to be matching up with last year's Breeders' Cup Classic winner, Sierra Leone, so very fun to have 2 Breeders' Cup Classic winners running in the Whitney, but we saw a brilliant performance in the Pegasus World Cup earlier this year, a decent effort to beat a weaker field in the Go Sapper, and then a regression last time in the Met Mile. Now, I guess you can use the sloppy track as an excuse for him, as you can for maybe some others in that Met Mile. I still was left a little cold by that performance, and I'm not sure what to expect here.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't like his Met Mile at all. And as well as he ran in his 2 prior starts, I'm not sure how much credit I want to give him for beating those kinds of fields over a track that he obviously really likes down at Gulfstream Park. I don't know, man. I know that he can win. As you laid out, he's run more than one race that if he shows up here and runs it, he'll easily beat this field. I've always felt like White Abarrio was a little bit of a phony, especially going 9 furlongs, and I want no part of him in here. He can prove me wrong.
The number 8 contrary thinking, Chad Brown, has been pretty explicit that he is only in here to provide some pace for Sierra Leone. He was a horse that used to be owned by Klarovich Stables. He was privately purchased by Peter Brandt, who's also a co-owner of Sierra Leone. So he's in here to go after Mama's Gold or fierceness on the front end and inject some pace into this race, which his stablemate obviously needs. Mike, in terms of his prior performances, he's coming off a career best effort, but not good enough to compete against these.
Yeah, definitely not. I've actually always been a little bit of a fan of this horse. And he did run really well last time when they stretched him out to the mile for the first time. He can't win this race.
The number 9, Fierceness, I installed as the slight morning line favorite. He's a horse that has generally been pretty popular with the bettors through his career. And you can make the argument, Mike, that when he ran against Sierra Leone in the Breeders' Cup Classic last season, he might have run the best race in defeat because he was contesting that fast pace that ultimately set it up for the winner and hung around until the end. He showed some grit and fight that we really hadn't seen from him in his prior races as a 3-year-old. And it feels like he finally put things together at the end of last year. Now, I'm curious to know what you make of his 2 performances since coming back as a 4-year-old, because obviously he was just better than the rivals he was facing in the Ali Sheba. It was a race with no pace. He sprinted home. Last time in the Met Mile, he might not have loved the sloppy track. That was also a race that they just kind of had to make up a speed figure for, because if you made the number based on the surrounding race, it probably would have gotten a number in the low 90s. And obviously these horses ran faster than that. But we've seen a couple runbacks now from the Met Mile, and they haven't exactly been flattering.
Yeah, true enough. It'll be interesting to see what he does here. I mean, I think it's reasonable to expect him to bounce back here with a better performance. But even as I say that, you have to still keep in mind that we're talking about fierceness here. This is a horse who more than once has failed to show up. And it's not always easy to make excuses for this horse, David. If you want to say that he hated this track, I guess I could go along with it. I thought he was terrible in this race, even though he finished second. I did not like this performance from him at all. I think all things being equal in this race, assuming all things are equal and everybody gets the trip that they want, they run their best race. I think if that happens, Fierceness will win here. I just don't know that that's going to happen. And I don't think I want to bet him as one of the favorites in this race.
Rounding out the field on the outside is the number 10, Post Time, a very easy horse to root for. He's a horse that has come from humble beginnings. It just seems to step up to the plate and compete against the tough horses every time. He'll get a piece of it, Mike. He doesn't win the top graded stakes races all the time, but I thought he actually ran really well in this race last year when he finished 3rd. There was a brief moment at the top of the stretch where Sheldon Russell wanted to go inside, lost momentum, had to go outside, and probably would have been second if not for that moment of indecision. Since then, he's placed in multiple graded stakes races, was second in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile with a good effort. They brought him back off a layoff this year. He's won 2 of 3. The one time they tried a graded stakes in the Blame, I hate to keep harping on this, but once again, didn't think he got the best ride in that race. A little bit of indecision at the top of the stretch, wound up in some traffic trying to come through. This horse is due for a perfect trip eventually. And if he gets it here in a race with pace, I do think he's got the ability to outrun his odds.
I agree. It's funny that you bring up the trip that he got in this race last year, and as well as the race 2 back at Churchill Downs. This is, just the prep race where they gave him class relief. He's way better than these horses. He's going to split them and run away. But man, I've seen that ride from Sheldon Russell so many times with this horse that it kind of makes me crazy. He did it at the Breeders' Cup as well last year, where instead of getting him out in the clear, he stays in, he gets the split, he comes towards the inside, which isn't always ideal for closer, but maybe that's just post time. Maybe that's how he wants to run. We were talking about the pace, David. It obviously helps a horse like Sierra Leone, and that's why the Rabbit's in here. It helps post time as much as it helps anybody in here. He's going to sit back. He's going to make one run. I really, really like this horse, and I'm using him in here.
Let's go to our picks for this grade 1 Whitney. And Mike, I think we were thinking along similar lines in here when I take a look at how we set up our picks in this race. We put different horses on top, but I imagine we have similar strategies.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, more than anything else, David, this race was about not who I was going to say not more about who I don't like than who I do like. I don't want to put it that way. It's more about who I don't want to bet as opposed to who I do want to bet. I don't want to bet Sierra Leone. I do not want to bet Fierceness. I would never bet White Abarrio in a field like this one. So I went looking for other horses. I was between my top pick and your top pick. I put Highland Falls on top.
Yeah, I think Sierra Leone, for me, clearly is the most likely winner of this race. I just feel like he's so obvious. He's not going to be an interesting price in here. And I don't believe there's such a huge gap in ability between him and my top pick Post Time that I wouldn't want to go to the bigger price on Post Time, who is due for a better trip. And that kind of ride that you were talking about earlier, Mike, it can work if the pace collapses, and we'll see if it does here. So 10-5, 3-9 for me, and 3-5, 10-9 for Mike in the DRF Saturday race of the day, the grade 1 Whitney Whitney at Saratoga. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.